right, in Bethlehem. And why was he born in a cave? Because these shepherds would use the caves when the weather was difficult, whether it was bad outside, or when it was time to birth these lambs to protect them. They'd bring them into these shepherds' caves around Bethlehem. They were kept in a state of ritual purity. And when they were born, they would actually wrap them in swaddling cloth, because little lambs are clumsy. The caves have a lot of jagged edges. If it was the cut itself, it would be blemished. The sacrifices in God's house had to be without spot or blemish. So they would swaddle them. So you could imagine these Levitical shepherds coming into the cave where the Passover lambs are born, and they see this baby born there swaddled like one of the Passover lambs, and they're like, oh my goodness, this truly is the Lamb of God who was born to take away the sins of the world.
Why is it that we've got it so wrong? Is it because people didn't translate the Hebrew correctly?
No, it's not so much the translate. Sometimes it's the translation of the Hebrew and the Greek, but I think part of the reality is that every translation is an interpretation. And so people tend to interpret things according to what they are familiar with, right? And especially, and a lot of it is not so much and some of it's not even interpretation of the biblical text itself, but to remember that in ancient times, most people were illiterate, right? And so that meant people learned through art, stained glass windows. They learned through the biblical scenes, like the manger scene that was established. And so when Europeans were making this, when they hear manger, right, they use wooden barns and stables for their animals. So in their mind, that must have been what it was, because they weren't familiar or connected to the Jewish Middle Eastern culture. They just pictured it as they would in their culture, and therefore that just comes tradition and comes down throughout the ages.
What about what you have to say about Bethlehem and Jesus being the bread of life is really exciting. Could you share about that too?
Yeah, of course. So it's so interesting. And I think there's a broader theme here, which is, we talked about how the birth of Yeshua is the birth of hope, because we know this is a season where the holidays can be hard. I mean, if you going through a hard time with your family, or don't have a lot of family, or because of coronavirus, I mean, there's a lot of hurt, there's a lot of heartbreak, there's a lot of heartache. That's what I love what you do, ministering and bringing love and hope, to people, which is, I think, such an amazing way that God is using you. So I thank God for you. Like we said, the birth of Yeshua is the birth of hope, right? And the holidays are about hope. And really, when Yeshua was born, it seems like it was such a dark time, right? It seems like it was hopeless. When you think about the birth story, the nativity, right? Think about it. There's this, Joseph and Mary, they're poor. They don't have a lot of resources. She's 9 months pregnant, or about, and this greedy Roman king demands a census to be taken, and they have to travel like 80 miles on a donkey, so pregnant. I mean, that's crazy, right? And it seems like they are just pawns in this schemes of this megalomaniac, greedy Roman Empire, and they just seem to be powerless, and they just have to do what they're told in a difficult situation. But that's what it is on the surface, right? Caesar didn't even know it, but God had Caesar give the decree at that time because Joseph and Mary had to be in Bethlehem to fulfill the messianic prophecy where it says in the book of Micah, but you, Bethlehem Ephrathah, though you be little among the thousands of Judah, yet one will come forth from you to me to be ruler of Israel, whose going forth are from the days of old, from everlasting. And so the king had his plan. You know, Joseph and Mary seemed like they were just this poor family, hopeless situation. Most people had lost hope in that time. You know, they could have looked at themselves as victims of their situation and circumstances. But God used all of that in a mysterious and wonderful way to get them to where they needed to be. And that should give us hope, because part of hope is knowing God has a greater plan. And even in all of the schemes and manipulations and things that we go through in life of individuals, God has a plan and he's working it out together for good. And he's actually in control, and he knows everything that is going on, and that his promises will always come to pass, even if that means a virgin has to conceive and bear a son, and a king has to decree a census be taken to get everything to line up according to the greater plans and purposes that he has for us. And I think that's good news. And Bethlehem, more specifically, obviously King David is from Bethlehem, and that's why Messiah has to be born. Jesus has to be born in Bethlehem, because he is going to be the Messiah, was going to come from the seed of David. But there's something more significant in that. And one of the things that we love to talk about is how the Bible is alphanumeric, how letters and numbers are connected. So in Hebrew, in the Bible, there's no Roman numerals in the scriptures, right? Numbers are written with letters in Hebrew. And so every Hebrew word has a numerical value. Well, there's a secret, a deeper mystery within the numerical value in the meaning of the word Bethlehem. In Hebrew, Beit Lechem. Bethlehem equals 490. Well, why is that significant? Nativity in Hebrew equals 490. Bethlehem equals 490. To be perfect or complete equals 490. The lambs had to be perfect or complete. So here is Messiah, the Tamim, the perfect lamb, 490, born in Bethlehem, 490. You know, so it all connects there. But of course, there's more, because when you think about 490 in the Bible, probably the most famous example of that is Peter comes to Jesus and says, how many times do I have to forgive? 7 times. He thought he was really spiritual. 7, the number of completion. Jesus is like, no, 70 times 7, 490. Well, why did he pick that number? Because 490 connects to forgiveness. As we said, Bethlehem equals 490, and Bethlehem means house of bread. Well, why is that significant? Because bread and forgiveness are connected. In the Lord's Prayer, give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us of our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. When we celebrate the Lord's Supper, communion, we break the bread, and Jesus broke the bread at the Last Supper. This is my body, which is broken for you. So the broken bread is symbolic of his death for us. And so it's no coincidence that bread and forgiveness and Bethlehem are all tied to the number 490, because just like we can't live physically without bread, we can't live without the bread of forgiveness. And when we withhold forgiveness from individuals, it's like telling a starving person, I don't care, go and die. And truly, when Yeshua was born in Bethlehem, which means house of bread, which equals 490, which is connected to forgiveness, Jesus was saying, not only am I the Lamb of God, but I am the bread of life who's broken for your forgiveness. And if you eat of me, you will never hunger on a spiritual level again. I will completely satisfy you.
Oh, that's good news. That is such good news. Thank you. I'm so glad you touched on that forgiveness.
Well, yeah. And I think this, and that's like so important at this season.
Yeah.